So thank you for joining us today. This is our final Contrail training series for 2021. We always conclude our training series at the end of the year with a year in review. This serves as a way for us to highlight all of the work that the team has done throughout the year, and to ensure that you were able to see all of the updates and new features and new services that were added to Contrail throughout the year. We know everyone here is busy, and it's been a hectic year or two, and so we just wanted to review it, take some time, walk through everything. So some of this you might already be familiar with if you were on some of our webinars or saw some of our videos that were released. Some you might this might be entirely new for you. So feel free to ask questions and to follow along with us. My name is Charles Yost. I'm a meteorologist and product marketing manager for OneRain and for our parent company AM. And we also have on the line Lindsay, who is our technical sales support manager. And she'll be covering the second half of the presentation today, where she'll get into some of the kind of nitty-gritty features of Contrail that was released this year. Like I mentioned, this is a full training series that we do once a month for the entire year. So go ahead and look forward to next year's training series. We'll cover similar topics. We are adjusting a few of those topics for next year. So if you have any sort of feedback, everyone should be receiving a survey in their email, and go ahead and give comments and feedback to that. Your feedback helps to drive how this evolves over time. So if there are certain areas that you would like to see more information or more in-depth training on, feel free to provide that feedback. Also, we'll giving you an opportunity to have us. What is the best route for us to relay this information? Because a lot of times things get lost in the shuffle, and our team works hard, and I know a lot of you really appreciate these new features, continued update cycles. So feel free to let us know how best we can get that information to you. So that will be coming as a survey via an email in the coming days. So look out for that. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump right into our recap of 2021 for our Contrail year in review training series. So the first big item that we launched had to do with our camera system that we launched a little over 2 years ago. So we've always, and most everyone on this call is familiar with our Contrail camera service. This is a image collection, storage, and visualization platform. We saw a need where a lot of people were starting to add cameras to their systems, and really to help verify conditions, see what the impacts following an event is, and also just to get a time lapse and have the Contrail team handle all of the logistics of adding a camera into a system. So we launched Contrail Camera a little over 2 years ago, but recently we added in a new tier within our Contrail Camera service, and this tier is called Contrail Vision, and this was released earlier this year, and we just wanted to highlight some of the capabilities that was launched with that and what you can do with that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump. I'm not going to give a full walkthrough of Contrail Camera, but I'll just jump right into our camera page here and jump to our tower that's actually on the back of our building at the OneRain headquarters. And we can see a bunch of cars here in the parking lot. Nothing too interesting here. So the standard capabilities that we've been providing since day one when Contrail Camera was launched. But we've recently added in the ability for object detection through machine learning. And what this does is it's able to look at these images that come in and to detect standard objects that are located within the frame. And so what this does is it allows us to simulate what a human would do, right? So we would look at this picture and see, hey, there's a bunch of cars here and maybe a building in the background. We understand what's going on. But this tool is really designed for looking at these images that come in at maybe after hours when someone isn't looking at this. these cameras generate a lot of images and are constantly pushing these images in. And Contrail Vision allows us to automatically detect what is in those images. And so we can see we have these boxes that are located around each one of these cars. We have it tuned for cars and buildings right now, and I'll talk about usage cases here in just 1 second. But we can see every one of the cars that are located in the parking lot have been correctly identified with the machine learning algorithm as being a car. And so behind the scenes, we're generating a lot of data. Each one of these points, we now have metadata that a car is present. And we can see under each one of these images now, we have a new section called labels, and we have our open image machine learning model that's actually running in the background. But we can see we have 21 cars that were detected, and some of these overlap, so that's why there's more cars and vans. But we also, as we hover, we can see a confidence level with each one of these cars that's detected, whether it thinks it's actually a car, and how confident that it is a car. So we're able to detect various objects and things within these images that are coming in, and this uses kind of natural language objects that it can detect. So things like buildings and trees and wheels, and we can also exclude whether certain categories are detected within the image. So we might not care about wheels because we can detect cars and trucks and vans and things like that. We might not care about trees, so we can exclude those. We can toggle these on and off. So let's just say we're not as interested in detecting a building, we can toggle that off. And if we go up to the top, that is now turned off. So this lives, the detection and management of the object detection is entirely administered through the Contrail camera service. And what this does is it allows us to generate data about these images. So instead of having us to look at these images, we can now take that data and plug it back into Contrail, which we'll get to in a second. So if we go under configuration and we go to our action section, we could actually go through this from the same model that we had defined. This isn't turned on here, but we can define an action from the particular model that we're looking at. So let me know if there is a car present, there's more than one car present, or let me know if a van is present or truck is present. Let me know if we detect a person within these images. We then can define a Contrail API, a system, a site and sensor, and we can push that data into Contrail and look at the individual data. So I have a site within Contrail that's defined for our Contrail camera vision testing. So it's looking at the One Rain Tower. And let's just say I'm really interested in when I have flooding conditions that are spilling onto a road. I really want to know if a car is in the frame of my camera image. So I want to know, A, is a car detected? And if so, is it flooding there? And you can obviously do that backwards. If it's flooding, let me know if a car is present. So we're able to make a sensor called car count that can detect every single camera image that comes into the system. The Contrail camera, through an action, can define whether a car count is more than 0. In this case, we received a report that there were 16 cars in January of this year as we were doing our testing. And now we can tie that into our water level sensor, right? So let me know if the water level is on the road, is more than 6 inches above the road, and that the car count is above 0. This will let me know that, hey, there's water on the road and there's potentially someone stuck on this road. There's potentially a truck or car or person stuck. And so with this alarm, we now can send it out to not only the system administrators of the system, but we can send it out to fire and rescue. We can send it out to other emergency managers, as well as public works, that, hey, we now have flooding conditions and we're seeing heavy traffic on this road because maybe people are diverting around other flooding throughout the system. So we're able to not only take the object detection, which from a human perspective is quite obvious that these are cars, but we can bring it into Contrail just like any other sight and sensor. We can do things like graphing, obviously, but the most appropriate and kind of best usage case for this is being able to alarm when certain conditions that we're worried about is operating. So another usage case might be, hey, let me know if there's a person walking on my dam, or let me know before I do this gate release out of this area that there's no boats within a certain distance or radius of this. So we can take that underlying data, start taking counts and confidence and plugging it into alarms, so we don't always have to be watching the camera images that are coming in, because especially during an event when there's a lot of data and alarms triggering, it's often can get overwhelming and you might miss something pretty easily. So we can rely on the Contrail vision to help detect and help to supplement some of those automatic things that you would do as a system administrator, and do it constantly, which works great for obviously after hours work and weekend work. But if you have an IR sensor on your camera, even detecting late at night when there's either flooding conditions or safety protocols that you're having to follow. So that is our big addition to the Contrail camera family. If that's of interest, feel free to reach out to the team. We can give a more in-depth walkthrough of this, and we can also listen to your usage cases and see if this is something that the models that we have will work. It's also an extendable system too, so we can add in different machine learning and object detection models over time that have been calibrated to, let's just say, to detect what the water level is on a staff gauge, for example. So this is something that we can expand into the future, and the team's already looking at that for next year. Okay, the next big release had to do with additional thunderstorm and storm data that you can help to supplement your operations. So we partnered with our sister company, fellow business unit Earth Networks. Earth Networks is a industry-leading lightning detection operator of a global lightning detection network that spans around the world. They operate a series of detection sensors that can detect in 3D both the type of lightning, location, and magnitude of lightning around the world. They also operate the largest private weather network of weather stations around the world as well too. And so we partnered with them to bring in all these services right into Contrail. And so I'll kind of start with the usage cases right up front. Lightning is a great indicator of early convection and deep convection. So if you're looking at flooding or looking at maybe how a storm is impacting your watershed, or even just an approaching line of thunderstorms, we've been able to do gauge adjusted rate of rainfall to look at those quantitatively, how much rainfall is falling. But lightning helps to understand what that give an early indication of, hey, is this storm starting to be a big deal, and is there some deep convection with this? And if so, let's go ahead and start monitoring that. Let's see how much rain is falling out of this. And for a lot of people on this call, this data is also used to help drive decisions out in the field, right? To close roads, to send somebody on top of a dam to ensure that a spillway is activated properly, or to inspect the erosion on a levee bank. Oftentimes, this data that all of us are collecting with Contrail this isn't the end point of that data, right? We're driving decisions that are happening in the real world. And that lightning is a real issue. It's a real safety hazard for our own employees and for the public as well too. So this allows us to get additional information and to alarm that, hey, obviously we're in a storm But are we expecting some early lightning before the storm hits us, or has the storm moved far enough away that we feel comfortable sending people out there to go stand on a dam in a wide open area to do an inspection or to look at something? So the kind of the best and the most visual way to look at lightning is on the map. So we can embed this just like any other layer, and we'll be talking about this area here just for a couple minutes. Here's our sample asset. So we would define things as a site and sensor in Contrail. We would call that in a more practical sense an asset. And all of this data is being visualized from our what's called the Total Lightning Network. Earth Networks just launched an upgraded version of their Total Lightning Network that has even more detection efficiency and is able to be more accurate with locations. And so this is using their new Total Lightning Network across the CODIS here. But we can filter based on whatever needs or applications someone is interested in. So for example, we have a example asset here. Let's just say this is a particular dam, or maybe you have a radio tower you want to monitor for lightning, or maybe you have open fields that are used as flood control structures, and you want to go out and inspect them. It really can be anything, and you can put in any latitude and longitude, and these rings are just defined thresholds, and you can change the color when there's lightning detected within those rings. So you can see, obviously we have some lightning here and it's within the outer ring, so that changes yellow there. But to just give a really quick pitch, we have flashes and pulses. Pulses make up flashes, and flash is kind of the entire entity of the electrical activity of a lightning strike or event. And then just like some of our other sensors, we can select the range that we want to look at this lightning data. So we can look at the last 15 minutes, last 5 minutes, or even out to 60 minutes. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, those that lightning information changes colors based on how old that activity is. So as we look at just the 5-minute data, it's red because it's less than 5 minutes. But as I pulled up the 60 minutes, you can see we had some green activity, and we can see we have a new cloud to ground strike that occurred within one of our outer rings. With the Earth Networks data, we can detect whether it's just within the cloud and not a direct safety event, or if it's there's more cloud to ground. That means the lightning is actually hitting the ground, and there's a potential for someone to be struck or have impacts from that. So we can, the in cloud is an arrow pointing left to right, and the cloud to ground is the traditional looking lightning bolt with either a positive or negative charge that's associated with this. For more information, we do have a full webinar that was given and walks through this information. So if this is something that you want to learn more, I'm not going to go too much deeper than this, but if this is something that is of interest to you and your team, or maybe other departments within your agency, feel free to watch that video and reach out to us, and we can walk you through that. What's also included nicely within that is we do have additional spheric fields that are generated off of this. So we have, we're looking at their radar layer, so we have a more accurate and a visually accurate radar here. But we can also look at things like storm ETA. And what this does is it takes the current radar field that we're looking at and actually assigns a motion to it, as well as the time to impact. So this is another great one where, hey, you know, we're seeing this line of storms that's moving. How fast is this moving? What is our time to impact? How far out do we have until we can start to see some of this impacts for us? So they have storm ETAs, and they also have other visible and infrared satellite layers that they can overlay and provide additional kind of operational decision-making tools and services. One last thing, we can also take this data that's within our asset or site and sensor and pull in that data from behind the scenes we can now alarm on it, right? So maybe someone who's on call can receive that, hey, there's active lightning in their area. Go ahead and maybe wait to get out of the car for a little bit before you go do your inspections, or if you have other departments, your Parks and Rec department could utilize the same system as well too for any of their operational or game time decisions that they might make. So that is our big partnership that we did this year. We've had a lot of great feedback and a lot of great traction on this. So again, if this is something that's of interest to you, feel free to reach out to us, and we can provide that information and also point you to some resources for you to take a look at. Okay, and the last thing. So we have a question, what is the latency on the Contrail lightning? Good question. So the actual latency is in the 1 minute range, I'll say. So we're talking seconds from when Earth Networks detects it and gets processed within their system and then gets shipped over to your Contrail instance. That gets pinged every minute to be brought in. So you're talking about around a minute, and then depending on your alarming and how quickly that runs. For visualization, this gets updated every 30 seconds behind the scenes, and new data is kind of being poured in every minute-ish. And then the alarming module would add another 30 seconds or a minute on top of that. So it's a very quick from by the time it detects it and it's visualized, and then just 30 to 60 seconds later till you could expect to receive an alarm. Good question. Okay, and if there are any other questions, feel free again to respond with a question right within the question box, and I'll be able to work that in. And as Lindsay gives the second half of the presentation, she'll be able to answer some of those as well too. Okay, so just a couple more minutes here, and I'll pass it to Lindsay to take us home on some new data feeds and visualization. To kind of lead her into that, we recently launched within the last 3 to 4 weeks earthquake data services in Contrail. So for those that are may or may not be familiar, for a lot of our mission critical assets, infrastructure assets across the country and really across North America, especially out west where there is significant seismic activity, there are certain procedures and things we have to do, or you have to do, depending on who's on the call, based on what type of seismic events occur and how close they occur to the infrastructure of point of interest. And so this can be anything from dams, which is the kind of the most common usage case. Dams are inherently risky just by the nature of how they're designed. And we rate that based on certain risk categories of what the impacts would be downstream. And so a high hazard dam means that the potential for loss of life and destruction of property downstream is high in the case of an event. So because of this this kind of inherent riskiness of dams and really all of our critical infrastructure around the country, there are certain procedures that need to happen if there is seismic activity that occurs. So we're really looking at magnitude, which I think everyone's fairly familiar with, as well as the distance away that occurred, right? So if we have a really weak one that is closer-ish, or a really strong one that's far away, there's different criteria, and we'll take a look at that in just 1 second. So for those, it may not be someone directly on this call that might have to do this or take a look at this, but I would guarantee if someone has either a flood control structure or obviously a dam, but anything with an energy grid or mines or any sort of public safety infrastructure, inspections derived or operational considerations derived from seismic activities is a really big deal, especially out west and a little bit in the southeast actually. So with this, we launched earthquake data services in Contrail is the name of the service. And similar to the total lightning network that Earth Networks provides, we use this. We pull in data from the USGS's global seismographic network. So they operate these sensors around the world, and they can triangulate seismic activity and derive magnitude and distance and location. And so we pull in this data from their network. You define whatever your critical infrastructure points are, and we can display all of the activity for a set radius around that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to start actually on a dashboard, which I think is the easiest way to kind of visualize and look at this type of data. So the first thing, we have defined this for a particular dam, right? So this is a fictitious real life dam, if you will. We could see its location here. It's out west, and we're calling it the Weber Dam. But we can see it's an earthen dam that has a spillway located on this. So pretty typical that would be impacted by seismic activity. So the first thing we have is our magnitude distance relationship that looks at magnitude and how far away. So anything over 4 and less than 6 miles away would trigger an inspection. Anything 4.5 and 9 miles away would trigger an inspection. So that's what I was talking about with the magnitude distance relationship. But we're able to bring in all of the information over set radius for this, and then we can derive, using our synthetic equations and rules, anything that we might want to trigger, including 2D and 3-dimensional synthetic tables that we can create. So the first thing is we could see all of the activity that's occurred within a set 300-mile radius. It uses our data feed uses real life words: how close, what's the closest city, what direction, and how far away it is, and how long ago that occurred. It also gives the exact latitude and longitude, as well as the how far down that occurred. And then in the circle here that will adjust sizes based on the magnitude, we give the actual reading of what that magnitude is. And if there's a particular event of interest, we can jump right into the USGS website and get more information about that. So things like radius and magnitude range, things like that. We can get more information jumping directly to USGS website. Down below that, we'll get to the middle section here in just a second. We can see all of, using our new table widget that Lindsay will talk about in just a second. We could see all of the reports within a 300-mile radius. So we get when that report occurred, bearing, depth, distance, and then the magnitude of that particular event. So obviously a lot of very weak and low events. We can do some filtering, but more importantly, if you have particular criteria that you want to trigger an inspection, or maybe you want to drop your lake level, or maybe you just want to document all of the activity that occurred within a certain distance and magnitude around your dam for your end of year reporting, you can do all that right within Contrail. So it's fed in just like any other site and sensor, and it keeps track. We'll jump to the site and sensor page, but it keeps track of all that information right within a site and sensor within Contrail. So we can see things like distance, what the magnitude was, what the depth and bearing relative to this particular point for this Weber Dam. We also can, one last thing, we can visualize it right on the map. So as you're jumping from hazards here, from lightning to earthquakes, you can quickly visualize that right within the map. And so if we zoom out here, let's do the last 3 weeks. We could see these. Zoom out more. You can see these little dots here are particular earthquakes. So we can see we had one fairly close by, and we can do things like, hey, how far away was that particular event in real time right on the map. So that's earthquake data services. again, this might not be something that someone on this call might be directly interested in, but we've had a lot of feedback for emergency managers, or if someone within their department is probably more than likely on this USGS alerting and looking at their global network. We can bring that in, couple that alarming, and provide, if you are an event or have some sort of seismic event, we can provide all the other information from a hydrologic and meteorological perspective. So, hey, we just had this really big event near this dam. We need trigger inspection, but also, what is our risk for downstream communities? What's the current reservoir level? What's our current release and discharge for that? And you can make operational changes. Also a great reporting tool, as I mentioned. So with that, I don't see any other questions here. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Lindsay is going to take over now, and she's going to be covering, while she's getting her screen set up here, she's going to be talking about all of the other things that we released this year. So we covered briefly, we covered our new Contrail vision module, we covered lightning and additional meteorological services brought to us by Earth Networks, and then seismic and earthquake data brought into Contrail. She's going to be covering everything else, including data feeds in all of our new visualizations and some of our new management tools. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lindsay.
Sorry about that. I realized that when I switched over my screen and minimized my control panel that I also hid my unmute button there. The wonders of technology sometimes, I tell you. So thanks so much for that introduction, Charles. Appreciate that. And that's a great place to segue into our discussion for the rest of the webinar, talking about some of the data feed options that we've now added to Contrail, as well as additional visualization and some back-end work that's been performed as well. Now, as Charles had mentioned, we've got these two new add-on services that really bring in additional data types into Contrail, being the lightning service from Earth Networks, as well as USGS earthquake data. Since he's covered those so in depth already, I'm not going to touch on those ones too much and focus on a few other details instead. So one of the things that I really want to highlight is that in the last year, we've focused on and worked on expanding our family of integrations through the AEM company that we are a part of. This involves the data feeds from all of our sister companies here. Things that we've seen and that we've really started to highlight especially is data through FTS 360, Davis Instruments WeatherLink, and Earth Networks spheric web interfaces. All of these are similar products to Contrail in many ways. Some of these have more of an emphasis on the consumer or the day-to-day user of the data, especially in the case with spheric weather stations and Davis Instruments weather stations. Oftentimes, folks outside of industry might have these locations set up in their own backyard. And so having access to this data can really bring in more localized reports and other details into Contrail. Now, with those three services, I do want to highlight that those require having an account already set up with those companies. So it's not necessarily, it may not be a free resource in the same sense that the USGS, that the National Weather Service, that METAR data might be. However, if these are services that you already subscribe to or someone in your agency subscribes to and wants to share into Contrail to bring in that additional value, we can absolutely help you get those set up. We have documentation in place and on our help page, which I'll also show off in a little bit. We have that available so that you should be able to configure these systems. In addition to those three sister companies that we're working with, our company Lambrecht in Germany, they make a logger product that we are compatible with and can bring the data in. We frequently send data out of Contrail to help support the work of our sister company View and Associates. They do a lot of GAR and stormwater forecasting and modeling, and so they're able to use the data that is collected within Contrail to help power their models as well. And then finally, we've worked with longtime sister company High Sierra Electronics, as we've talked about before, with their Alert and Alert 2 data. as well as their high water detection systems where they have flashers and gates installed that can be triggered both automatically by reports and triggered remotely through Contrail to turn on the flashers and lower those gates so that you can really have that remote access. Things that we haven't focused on a whole lot from High Sierra is going to be their RWIS offerings for road weather and other details there, as well as a recent product with REMS. Now, REMS is their remote erosion monitoring system, where they have these puck sensors that are embedded in the ground, and then when that ground that they're embedded in is eroded, they flip over and will start transmitting when they pass through a specific gateway. Now, this is data that is passed through Contrail, and so Contrail serves as the visualization and notification platform for that erosion monitoring system. So all really excellent offerings. We're proud to be able to support those additional companies within our AEM family, and I hope that you'll look forward to hearing more about this partnership that we'll be expanding upon within the next year. Now, outside of our sister companies, we have worked to expand upon data sources outside of them with third-party data. One of those is through the Aquarius system, Aquarius web portal. If your agency has been collecting data through those additional systems, we do now have the ability to integrate that data and source that through Contrail as well. They have an API that we use, and we're able to query that and draw that data in and further expand upon that. And we have a couple of clients who are already using this and have reported back great success with this system. Another one that was recently added due to popular requests was the HoboLink system through Onset HoboLink stations. They have an online web portal that allows for us to pull that data in as well. So if this is another type of data collection that your agency uses, or you use these type of stations, this is a tool that we offer to bring that data in as well, really just expanding upon our base of what types of data we support, what types of hardware we can support the data from. Another option that had been requested is through Eris Weather. They're a company that collects data through Met stations, as well as the Weather Service and a variety of others as well. So they are, again, another third-party company. They do require a subscription in order to be collecting data there in the first place. So note that this is something where we, with Contrail, will not charge. However, they do charge for access to their product. So if this is something that you've looked into or that someone else may have recommended to you, we can talk more and kind of look at what this might look like. We don't have too many for live options that I can demo to you right now, but they are just one other option that we will support. And then finally, IntelliSense is a company that we've heard from many times, and we now have a data collector that actually is of the pushing data into Contrail. You know, a lot of the things that we've looked at so far with Aquarius, HoboLink, and Eris, those that serve as agents, where, as a reminder, we're reaching out and asking for that latest data on a timed interval. With data collectors, such as this one from IntelliSense, we have a socket that is open and waiting for that data to be pushed into the server, similar to what you may see with your Alert or Alert 2 systems. So this is something that will require networking. We will help with providing which port and which IP address you'll be pushing to. And that is one further option. I know that they have a lower cost sensor system that is being deployed in many different locations. So this is one more thing that we do support in Contrail with respect to additional data sources. Now, a couple of other things, kind of just with data feeds, data types, we have added additional mapping options. We support GeoJSON map types now, as well as the web map feature server type that's available through ArcGIS. So two new map types that we can offer here, just expanding those additional details depending on what you or your GIS department might have in their suite of tools that you can now integrate into Contrail further. Aside from that, looking at different data types, we have expanded some types of data as well for when you're looking at calculating that new data. So we've spoken at previously, and we'll be talking about this even more in future webinars. How can we create new data types based on the data that we're already collecting? Now we've looked at things like, how do we find the maximum value over the last 24 hours and have that saved off as a sensor that reports on a timed basis. We also now have an average value over the last X amount of minutes. So that's a new one that we can work with there. And we also have a new equation for calculating wet bulb temperature. Now, depending on your background, some folks from a non-meteorological background may not understand what wet bulb temperature is. However, it's really another way that we can quantify the amount of moisture in the air. We've looked at things like relative humidity, dew point temperature. Wet bulb temperature is one more way that we can calculate that. I may have a question coming in. I'm going to try to open that up real fast. I don't think I do. So we'll see exactly how that works. If you've got a question, again, please feel free to use that questions panel in the bottom of your GoToWebinar portal, and that will help me see that. I see that there's a hand up, but I'm not sure that I can unmute people in the middle of the conversation here. So we'll continue, and if I can at the end of this, I will totally try to unmute everybody so that way we're able to ask questions openly. All right, so kind of did a quick overview of the different types of data that we've now added into Contrail and what we can throw in here. Next thing I want to look at are some of our new visualization options within the Contrail software. And this is going to really focus on a lot of different different widgets for dashboards, as well as presentation of your homepage. So switching over. One of the new widgets that we have, and this may not seem like it's very new because we've looked at it in a different form, is a map widget. Previously, when you were working with maps and trying to get them on your dashboard, we had to take a roundabout path where they were embedded as an iframe with a URL reference to the map already within Contrail. To make things even easier than that, we've embedded a dedicated map widget where on the setup page, all you have to do is select the view that you want to highlight, if there's a particular sensor type that you want to highlight, and then choose your layers. We also now, very recently, I think this came out within the last update or two, have the ability passed in to focus on a particular zoom level and latitude and longitude. So that way, if there is a better way of depicting the view rather than auto zooming out to collect all of the sites and sensors within that view, you can specify where exactly you want to be the central focal point of that map view. So new map widget, again, that makes it easier so that you don't have to try to find the exact URL and encode that so that it passes through that iframe widget. You can now use simply the map widget that will build up all of those details and display appropriately for you. Moving on from there, we do have a couple types of new graphing widgets. I think the next topic is something that Charles alluded to, but I'm going to scroll down on my page here to really look at these. We've got new bar and column graphs. Now, these are really great if we're trying to compare the current levels of two different but related types of data. For example, for the bar graph that we see kind of on the left and central part of my page, we're comparing incoming shortwave at two different locations. So that way we're able to see how this varies on a site-by-site or maybe sensor-by-sensor basis, just having a comparison of those current values. When I scroll down further, we'll see the options for the column graph. Here I have a comparison set up between different temperature-related sensors here. So we've got air temperature, dew point, heat index, and wind chill. We can see how these temperature bases really change across these different sensors. Air temperature is close to heat index. Of course, heat index is calculated based off of air temperature, as is wind chill. So we can kind of see, okay, well, they're all very close to each other, but varying slightly here. So again, two different widget options for showing multiple types of data and allowing for comparison of what are those most recent values. Then next, for another new widget type, this is one that Charles did allude to, was our data table widget type. This is actually done best with some of the more time series data, so to say, because we can see how this changes on a timely basis. We see it showing every day at 1900 here, and it's showing those reports across multiple different sites, multiple different sensors, and filling in those reports where they are present already within Contrail. So it shows it in that tabular format. I think personally this works best with data that comes in on a time series. So if you don't have time series sensors, data maybe this is SNOWTEL data, for example. However, that could also be from the USGS, from METAR, from HADS, all of these other sources where we reach out and retrieve that data at a timed basis would work really well in a data table. Now, that isn't to say you can't use this for things like your alert data. That's more event-based data. It just will be offset more in that those reporting times may not always line up at the exact time. So you'll have multiple entries, perhaps where you may see that there isn't something across that table. Excellent. I'm not sure if we've released this one previously as well, but I do want to feature that we've got the statistics widget for this data type as well. I like this one a lot. You choose which site, which sensor you want to be looking at, as well as the interval over which you want to be referring. And it will summarize the statistics that are available over that time period. You know, what is the current value? What is the maximum, the minimum, the average, and also how many reports were received over that time period. So that way you're kind of able to get that quick summary of what may have happened in your chosen interval. I've used these a lot recently in some of the dashboards that I've worked on, just because it gives that great oversight there. They can also be used for more than one site, more than one sensor, obviously, but this is a great one for looking at the wind speed. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we got gusts out of this one. That would have been great based on the windstorm that went through Colorado yesterday, and also impacted much of the plains in the Midwest as well. So we do see that the maximum sustained wind speed was 25 miles an hour, which admittedly is pretty high. So this would be cool to see, you know, if we had had that gust information in here. That's a shame. Should have looked into that one for setting up for this. Excellent. So next we've got another new type of data, another new type of widget. We have previously had widgets for embedding features from Google Drive and Microsoft, not SharePoint, but goodness, I can't think of what the other service is called. But you know, the global sources for sharing files and resources. Another recent request that we got was for the box sharing resource, for lack of a better phrasing. And so we now also support Box. Box is a lot like Dropbox, is a lot like Google Drive, you know, the standard there. And you can share details from your folder in a list or a grid, or share a specific file. We know some agencies use Box as opposed to some of the other resources. So this is just one more that will allow you to share these file types from a specific Box account. Now moving forward, another thing that I want to highlight is going to be the display type that we have. You know, there have been expansions within how we can display some of these, and I don't have any examples specifically live, so that's why we've switched over to the admin side. We can see when we're editing or creating a new widget. This is my tile widget type under the data widgets. And I can see when I scroll down that previously, you know, our panel cut off at colors, where we can assign different colors to specific values and specific ranges. Now, in addition to that, we can customize what details show up on those tiles. So if I want to show only the site name, the sensor name, and the reading, I can toggle site ID to no and site sensor ID to no to hide those additional details. It further simplifies the display of a specific title, so that way we have only the information that we want to show there. Can toggle any of those off so that it's only a tile showing a reading or a name, which would serve as a link there. And speaking of links, that's something that's now something that can be changed. So when you went to dashboards and clicked on a tile widget or a link somewhere along those, previously it would have taken you to the sensor details page by default. However, now you do have the ability to switch between if it's going to be the sensor details page or the site details page for any particular tile widget. So glad to have additional ways that we can really customize and dial into that. One other thing, the height for this tile widget, and we now have an extra small size, very compact, nice and easy to read if you want to really have that, you know, more readings for the space that you have, trying to fit in a lot. Pack a punch is the phrasing I was trying to look for. We can really get all of those in there in a short amount of space using that extra small height display here. Previously, we had the auto, the small, the medium, and the large. And so like that for one other option that we have. Now, finally, on that topic of dashboards, we're going to be looking at things like adding new rows. Previously, we were able to define just the column setup, you know, how many columns of widgets you would like. Now, in addition to defining columns, you also have the ability to define different rows and therefore define the number of columns within that row. So for example, here we have the first row has a 2-column breakdown, with the first column taking up 75% of the page and the second column taking up 25%. Then we have a second row with 1 column, where we then have that 1 column taking up 100% of the page. Now I'm going to open this up outside of the admin so that we can see exactly how this works. This is a revisitation of that map widget page. And so when I open that in a new window, we can preview that. And we see here, again, 1 row at the top where we have 75% and 25%. And then I can scroll down further and see that next row where it's taking up 100% of that page. So again, one other way that we can really break this up, add detail, really customize this to your standards. And we did this in part because of the new feature that we have for customizing your home pages. So this isn't done entirely in that sense yet, but I've scrolled over, switched to a new tab. This is my home page management page where we go through admin to web to pages, select your home page. Previously, we've got, I've got a question that came in. Is there a way to move a row up or down like you can a widget in a column? Not in the exact defined way that you're describing. So the way that I would move a row up or down, unfortunately, would be to change the content in there. You can change the layout of the row, switch the row from a 1-column display to a 2-column display, and then from each individual widget, there's a drop-down where you can define which row and which column that widget is in. So unfortunately, no, we don't have a fancy way for, you know, redefining how to move that row around. It's more that you will, because we don't, in the same sense, we don't have a way to move a column around specifically. Rather, you can move the widget into a different row, into a different column instead. I hope that answers your question, and I'll type out responses to these questions once we get towards the end of this webinar. Trying to keep myself moving along so that I don't waste too much of your time. I know we're nearing the end of our allotted time period here. So as I said, you know, we're working on applying new logic to how you create your home pages. Previously, you would type in an HTML box. You could drop in source code if you know HTML or CSS programming there, or you could use the plain text editor to write that information in. As of now, our pages are actually set up more similarly to dashboards, where you can still drop in HTML as we see here. But this looks very similar to the dashboard page I was just on. We can add in new rows, change columns here. And when I click on the plus sign to add in different content components here, they look like our widgets. We can choose from the widget types for a card image, links, drop downs, images, etc. And some of you who are more recent clients of ours may already see this in place with your current home pages. So we will not switch things over automatically to the new format. However, you are welcome to start exploring this. This feature was really enabled so that you have more control over doing this yourself, and how you can, you know, instead of feeling overwhelmed by the idea of, oh my gosh, do I have to learn how to write HTML in order to have a great, attractive homepage? Now we've made it easier that you're able to manage these details yourself without having to get us involved to have a new project to get this all loaded up. So great options here. Really excited to see this out there, and I'm happy to, you know, consult, show a few ideas of this, and we'll be expanding upon this further in future demonstrations. So finally, a few details that I want to focus on before I wrap things up are going to be some of the things that we've implemented on the back end to help keep things moving along and adding further value, even though it may not display in such a flashy manner. So one of the first things we've done is we have now deployed password verification to all Contrail, inventory, TDMA, and other applications that we offer. Password verification is enabled from on an individual user basis. You go to that user, drop down to passwords, and then from there we can turn on verification. You'll see here in this account, I'm a little naughty here and we have it turned to no, but I can turn it to yes. And what that will do is when you attempt to log in, it will display a page where you're prompted to enter a secondary code. That code will be found in your email. It will send that code to the email address associated with your user account. Please ignore the clock in the background. Unfortunately, I don't know how to turn that thing off. I will pause while we have our, moment here and move on to my next page in the meantime. Right, now that we've had that lovely interlude, we're going to be looking at status. This is a reminder, this isn't necessarily a new feature, but our status page can be used, and I definitely recommend that at least one contact from every agency is subscribed to this. We use the status page to also push out messages related to the operational status of Contrail. One of these things that I do want to put, the reason why I'm plugging this as a reminder is one of the recent messages we've pushed out through here is about that log4j that everybody's been hearing about. We do know that this has been recently reported in the global community. We are continuing to review this issue, but we believe that the version of this software package used by Contrail is not impacted by the vulnerability. Our configurations would prevent the exploit that has been noted as well. So like I said, we're continuing to review. We will implement security measures as necessary, but as of this moment, we are not impacted by this. These messages will have gone out if you're subscribed to our status page. This is not a mailing list for promotional marketing emails, etc. This is purely for status information. So we recommend subscribing if you haven't already. Then finally, the last thing that I really want to plug is that many of you should have received an email recently that we will be changing our update cycle starting next month. Again, that is something that we are starting next month, and this will impact those of you who are in Contrail Cloud Server and Contrail Base Station. Again, that is the services that are hosted by us in our in our cloud stack, as well as those of you who self-host your servers. Our updates are moving from the second Tuesday of the month and will now be on the second day of the month. So for next month, that will be January 2nd that you will receive your new updates to your Contrail servers. This does not impact those of you who are in Contrail Shared Web, but we will continue to have rolling updates throughout the month to continue to support you in Contrail Shared Web. So just a reminder, second day of the month will now be your new update day in Contrail. If we will continue to take into consideration weather instances. I know recently we had some storms in California and we had a few folks reach out to us and ask to delay their updates because of that. And we will consider to take those into consideration and monitor those details. But anyhow, it does look like I am reaching over my time here, so I am going to sign off. Quick plug, like Charles said, please join us for our next webinar. That's going to be Thursday, January 20th in 2022, believe it or not. So we have that coming up. We'll be talking about Contrail Administrator Basics, and we're looking forward to see you then. I hope that you all have a safe and healthy holiday season. Take care, and we're excited to see you next year.